It's Phil Friday, and we are back here in the gun with Phil Steele just around the corner.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With special guest, Phil Steele.
Author of the College Football Bible.
You can see things before they happen.
Well, I definitely like West Virginia's offensive line.
All you got to do is bet on the winner and you'll never lose.
I like the Mountaineers to win this one.
Taylor, touchdown!
To me, the key matchup here is that West Virginia run game. Hey, a real pleasure being on. Thanks for having me on the In the Gun podcast.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 183, and yes, it just feels like college football is officially back whenever me and Jed get to sit here every Thursday, Friday morning and get to talk to Phil Steele about his thoughts on the Mountaineers, some thoughts around the Big 12, top 25. It's always great to talk to Phil. We're so gracious and thankful for his time. I know he's a busy man, but we're so thankful, and it's going to be a lot of fun once again here, Jed.
Looking forward to having the author of the College Football Bible back in the ITG fold. Love picking his brain each week. It's always intriguing. He always comes up with a couple things that you wouldn't have thought of. So we're going to dive right back into it. And typically in the same format that we had last year, Skylar, I think what we're going to do is set the table with you and I coming up with our own little handmade picks here. And about West Virginia's matchup for the week, that, of course, being the Penn State Nittany Lions, the invaders from the north. And then we'll come back from the break and we'll get into our visit with Phil. So if you're ready, drum roll, please. Are you ready to make your Penn State picks? All right.
Let's do it.
Okay, start with this. Last year in Happy Valley, and this was one of the interesting things about that matchup, the rushing offense on both sides, 146 and 146. We ran for 146. Penn State ran for 146. So here's my question. Coming into this season in Morgantown, this season opener, West Virginia, of course, knock on wood, riding the crest of the nation's longest streak of 140-plus yards rushing in a game, 16 consecutive games. West Virginia with the longest streak in college football currently. Penn State, meanwhile, last year, only allowed 44 rush yards a game on the road, which was number one in the country. Yeah. So very intriguing and critical part of this matchup, you figure, in Morgantown. Quite simply, last year it was 146 to 146. Who will rush for more yards this year, or will it still be an even draw?
Man, that's a tough one right out of the chute. You know what? I think, and this is actually going to bode well for West Virginia. Even though I think Penn State will rush for more yardage, I think West Virginia will have the better day offensively in terms of overall yardage because Garrett Green's going to be more refined as a passer. And because of that, they're going to be able to throw earlier in downs. Neil talked about it before in camp. So just that alone, that's why I'm going to go with Penn State rushing for more, because I feel like they probably have to lean on those two running backs, or West Virginia doesn't feel that necessarily as much. Penn State's got some questions at receiver. They got talent, but they're question marks as of right now.
You're going with Penn State's rush for more yards, and I'm going to agree with you. I do think that they're probably a little uncomfortable with the fact they couldn't get Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen uncorked last year against West Virginia to the extent they wanted to. Now, you could argue they didn't have to because of the big day that Drew Aller had, but I think it's a fundamental part of Penn State's offense, and they do not want to go on the road without feeding these two horses, and I really think they're going to try and try and try again to run the football and set up some play action opportunities for Drew Aller. So I agree they will find a way to rush for more yards. But I would also agree with you that I think maybe West Virginia has the bigger, more efficient offensive day. We'll see. So on to question number 2. Let's stick to the rushing part of this. This is kind of interesting. A quirky little fact about last year's quarterbacks. Of course, when you think of Garrett Green, you think of the big play in the running game. In addition to the passing game, ran for almost 800 yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, tied for the lead among all Power 5 rushing quarterbacks. Drew Aller, not so much. Ran for a couple hundred yards, sneaky athletic, He's a weapon in the red zone, rush for 4 touchdowns, but that's not what you think of when you think of Drew Aller. Here's the quirky little stat. On third downs, Drew Aller rushed for 12 first down conversions last year. So on average, once a game, just about, he found a way with his feet to move the chains on third down. He had 12. Garrett Green had 11. You would not guess that.
No.
Drew Aller actually rushed for more first down conversions on third down than Garrett Green. Again, sneaky athletic. He's kind of unheralded in that part of his game, but he's not a guy who's just going to take the ball and bucket for 75 and hurt you that way. So in Andy Kotelnicki's new system, once again, here's the question. Which quarterback will rush for a first down on a third down play? Each of them averaged about 1 a game last year. So will it be Garrett? Will it be Aller? Will it be both? Or will it be neither?
I'm going to go Gigi. And I think he's going to have several opportunities to run the ball in this game. Aller, I don't really know. Like I said, I think they're going to really lean on Singleton and Allen. And I also wonder, Jed, how many of those first down rushes were quarterback sneaks or short yardage situations?
There were a lot of third and shorts. Yeah.
So that's what makes me think that stat's a little inflated. Garrett's going to get a first down with his legs on 1st and 10. He could do it 1st and 15. And Aller, like you said, not much of a runner, but he can get the job done if needed. But I'm going to go Gigi.
I'm going to go both. I do think there's going to be a third and short situation in which Drew Aller will sneak it. But with Garrett, it's just hard to bet against him. He had the highest percentage of all ball carriers in the entire Big 12 of rushes that resulted in a first down, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
He had a higher percentage than any other player in the entire Big 12 conference of his rushes resulting in a first down. So I'm going to go with both. I do think there'll be a situation where Drew Aller finds a need to do so. Now, moving on, let's go with penalties. I can't get over the fact that, and this has been in my crawl since last year when we left Happy Valley, Penn State last year in that opener had 1 penalty for 5 yards. 1 penalty for 5 yards. The rest of the year in the other 12 Penn State games, they averaged 46.9 penalty yards per game. So, on the road with new coordinators in a hostile environment in all 3 phases, over under 46.5 penalty yards for Penn State. They had 1 penalty for 5 yards last year. Over under.
I'm going to go under. I think they're a disciplined football team. They know that if they're going to come out of or leave Morgantown with a win, they know they can't come in here and help West Virginia out. That's exactly what they're going to need to have happen outside of some big plays on their own. So I'm going to say they go under. They play a pretty clean game. I think this is going to be a pretty clean game overall.
I'm going to go over. I think the coordinators will have an impact. I think the crowd could have an impact. I can't imagine 1 penalty for 5 yards again. I'm going to say there's a couple of holding penalties, maybe even a personal foul. So real quickly, let's wrap up with this. Pass attempts for Drew Aller. Last year, he averaged 30 a game. Against West Virginia, had 29 a game. Andy Kotelnicki, Kansas offense last year, averaged 24 a game. Let's split the difference. Drew Aller, over under real quick, 26.5 pass attempts against West Virginia.
Over by a hair. I think it stays on trend or on pace to stay under for most of the day. And in the 4th quarter, they have to throw it a little bit more. So I'm going to go slightly over.
See, we made this boring, so I'm going to have to diverge here. I was going to say over, but just to be different, I'm going to say under. Wrapping it up.
Well, before we send it to our break to bring in Phil, we want to send out a special shout out to Bet Online, obviously our presenting sponsor of the show, your number one source for all your betting needs. Bet Online, where the game starts, and obviously to our friends at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. So stay tight right here on ITG. As soon as we come back from the other side of the break, we'll have Phil Steele and his thoughts on the Mountaineers and some other games around college football.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
Nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
And we are back with college football's best. That is the author of the College Football Bible, as Jed likes to call it, and one of the best brilliant minds in all of college football. That is Phil Steele. He was so good last year. We had so much fun talking to him. We had to get him back on this year. We'll have him on each and every week throughout the season. Phil, glad to have you back on. Thanks for doing this with us again this year, and also take some time to plug anything that you got going on right now.
Hey, thanks. Great to be back on once again with you guys. It was a lot of fun last year and looking towards more fun this year. Right now, the magazine available, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, they're running out both places, so make sure you get them before the season. You'll be using it all year long. It's like getting 134 media guides rolled into one. Or you can, of course, go to philsteele.com. And today on philsteele.com, if you go there, I'll have my YouTube video up. I'll have 7 selections for you and a couple of quick hitters. So a lot of good information. Make sure you check out my my Phil Steele Plus tour with selections today.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, I did download the digital version earlier this summer, and I tell you, it is absolutely worth it. So if you want to gain some more knowledge about West Virginia or other teams around the Big 12 or country, go and check out Phil Steele's stuff. So,
Skyler,
yes,
Skyler, I would add this: even the FCS level, because guess where I got my Albany information,
right?
with Albany around the corner on the schedule. So it's not just confined to FBS football; it's FCS. It's deep. It's great. So absolutely do whatever you need to do. But if you're not at this point, if you're not dialed into Phil Steele and what Phil Steele has to offer in print and the digital version, you really need to change that.
Yeah, if not, you're missing out. So we'll get it. We'll get his first thoughts here on In the Gun. So Phil, let's go and kick it off with some some top 25 action. This game probably in years prior would have been a more marquee matchup. It's still a top 15 matchup between Clemson and Georgia. Clemson's kind of not been the same as they were during that little dynasty run that they had. Feels like they started to kind of turn a corner at one point last year, but Georgia seems like a clear favorite, not only in just this game, but pretty much in every game they're going to play this season. Phil, is there any chance that Clemson can not only just provide a scare, but somehow miraculously walk out with a win?
Yeah, I think there's a great chance of it, actually. When you look at Clemson, let's go back and take a look at last year. They lost 4 games, right? So you think, well, they were pretty not good for Clemson's standard team. In those 4 games they lost, they had a 94-60 first down edge. You go back and look at that Florida State game. Florida State finished the season undefeated, right? And when they had their quarterback, they were outstanding. Clemson never traded a single second against Florida State. They gave up a fumble return for a touchdown, missed a game-winning field goal, had a massive first down edge, lost it in overtime. They were as good as Florida State was last year. They were as good as as all the teams they lost to. They just didn't get it done on the scoreboard. Now, Clemson's weakness has been at the wide receiver position. And coming into last year, they lost their top 2 wide receivers in the first couple of games. So they were still weak at receiver. Well, they got those top 2 guys back, and they bring in a great true freshman recruiting class. Guys like TJ Moore, my number 11 rated wide receiver out of high school, Brian Wesco, my number 10 rated wide receiver out of high school. And that's been the missing piece. They've got Kate Klubnik back, and last year he had a 19-9 ratio. They've got the receiving core. The offensive line is solid. The defense, one of the best in the country. I think Clemson's a live dog here. I think it's going to more resemble the Clemson-Georgia games of years past, where the underdog, by the way, is 15-4, I believe it is. So I like the dog with Clemson, and an upset wouldn't surprise me.
Pivot from Clemson, but stay in the ACC, Phil. And this is one of those games that on the early slate kind of jumped out at you as a bit of a surprise. It did to me. You got Miami. A lot of people are projecting them to be a 10, 11 game winner this year under Cristobal on the road in the swamp. The hottest of all seats in college football might be Billy Napier with the Florida Gators. And yet the line's only 2.5. You got the Hurricanes getting 2.5. Some people are leaning into the Florida Gators in the swamp in this matchup. Yes, it's a rivalry and all things are off the table or on the table in a rivalry game. How do you see this unfolding in the swamp?
Yeah, I think Florida's going to be better than expected. And you have to understand that the Vegas under totals, like Miami's is 9.5 and Florida's 4.5. So you think, well, Miami's a lot better team, right? No, that's based on the schedule. I mean, Miami takes on the number 43 schedule. In fact, if you dive in closer, and I'm very high on Miami, I've got them ranked number 10 in the country. If Miami loses this game, they'll be favored over Florida A&M, Ball State, at USF, Virginia Tech at home, at Cal, possibly at Louisville, Florida State at home, Duke at home, at Georgia Tech, home to Wake Forest, at Syracuse. They could easily win their last 11 games, go 11-1 this year, even if they lose this game. Now, I like the talent. Cam Ward, I like the addition of Damian Martinez at running back. They've got Restrepo and George at wide receiver. And the defense is solid, and the offensive line is mammoth. But, last year, and I've been talking to Coach Napier since he was at Louisiana, naturally. And last year I said, Coach, Graham Mertz really doesn't fit your offense. I wasn't impressed with him at Wisconsin. And he said, Phil, highly intellectual. This guy's a hard worker, comes in, first out. He's going to have a great year. And guess what? He led the SEC in completion percentage at 73%, had a 20-3 ratio. So this year I started out the conversation, I said, Coach, that schedule, oh my God, it's the toughest in the country, which it is. And he said, Phil, it is, but I think at the end of the year, you might not think it's as tough. And what he meant by that was if they beat Miami of Florida at home, which is very possible, the Swamp's a tough place to play, beat Texas A&M at home, I've got them favored in that game, beat LSU at home, beat Ole Miss at home. These are all winnable games, and it is the Swamp where they beat Tennessee last year. Remember, Tennessee was ranked number 11 in the country. Then all of a sudden you say, okay, the schedule wasn't as tough. So I'm high on Florida. I think they topped that 4.5 win total easily. They made my most improved list. And I think they pull the upset here in the Swamp in the opener.
Bill, big one down in College Station, a changing of the guard there as Mike Elko takes over in his first year after spending some time at Duke. He's going to be going up against his former quarterback that was at Duke, and that's Riley Leonard, who's now the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. Top 20 matchup. This is, talk about tough places to play. This is another one. Is Notre Dame able and ready to go into this type of atmosphere and pull out another win?
Now this one I probably don't have an opinion on because I think Notre Dame is the stronger team. If you look at the Irish, they finished number 8 in my rankings last year in my YP or average game grade. Marcus Freeman, as you mentioned, added in Riley Leonard at the quarterback position. They're very solid. They've got one of the top defenses in the country, and the offense is outstanding as well. I do think they're the better team. However, to me, the edges all go with Texas A&M. I mean, Mike Elko prepped for Notre Dame last year when he was at Duke as they played Notre Dame. He knows Riley Leonard inside and out. It's College Station, which is one of the toughest venues to be in. Notre Dame's got 2 new offensive tackles against a Texas A&M defense that when I talked to Coach Elko, I went over the team with him, he said this has a chance to be the best defense he's ever coached if the cornerbacks and weak side linebackers come together. And Elko's coached some pretty good defenses, including just 3 years ago at Texas A&M, where they allowed 15.9 points per game. They've got Connor Wigman back at quarterback and healthy, and he was outstanding when healthy last year, and a veteran offensive line. So I think Notre Dame's got more talent. A&M's got the edges as far as the situation, home field. I'm just going to get the popcorn out and watch this game.
Interesting. And Phil, you got out in Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, you got two ranked teams squaring off, and USC and LSU. And to me, I want to get your take on this. This feels to me like one of those program stability matchups. When you lose generational quarterbacks like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, those guys don't grow on trees, and it tests the stability of your program overall in terms of how quickly you might be able to bounce back from losing what these two teams lost last year. So you've got LSU as a 4-point favorite, last I saw, matched up against USC. Which of these two staffs, Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly, do you think that is going to have their team more equipped for a matchup like this to get rolling in the post era of these two quarterbacks?
Yeah, these two teams, I mean, you can basically look in the mirror and see each other. I mean, they both lose Heisman Trophy quarterbacks. Last year, they both had below average offenses. This year, they both bring in new coordinators on the defensive side of the ball. LSU went to Missouri and brings in Blake Baker, a top-notch addition. Baker had some outstanding defenses at Missouri. They have a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball, including Harold Perkins. I think they'll be better. Offensively, I think losing their quarterback might just hurt them more, because let's take you back to the last time LSU lost a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. It was 2019. They had Joe Burrow, and they averaged 48.4 points per game. The next year, they dropped all the way down to 32 points per game, a drop-off of 16 points per game. I don't think the drop-off will be as big, but Nussmeier's a completely different quarterback than Jaden Daniels was. Maybe even a better passer, but he's not the dangerous runner. They're going to use their running backs more. Now, with USC, they bring in a new defensive coordinator in Danton Lynn, and he also brought some guys over with him from UCLA. And what Lynn did last year at UCLA was remarkable, because UCLA had averaged allowing 403 yards per game. They only gave up 302 last year. They went from allowing 29 points per game to 18. He brings those schemes. He brings in the players. They have a lot of transfers coming down the defensive side of the ball. They've got a quarterback in Miller Moss who tossed 6 touchdown passes in the bowl. Lincoln Riley always has a quarterback that's one of the best in the country, so I have no questions there. So I think it's going to be a great game. I think LSU might have a little more overall talent, but the situation might just favor USC. I'll take the dog in this one. Let's call for the upset with USC.
Dogs are barking. Okay, so let's go to a Friday nighter. This is TCU at Stanford, kicking off some Big 12 teams here, Phil. 10:30 kick on ESPN. Depending on where you look, it looks like the Horned Frogs are about a 9.5, 10-point favorite. Troy Taylor went 3-9 in his first year as a Stanford head coach, and now he's got to go fly across the country for half of his games. So not the most ideal start for his first big-time job, but TCU, it feels like they're a team that's ready to kind of turn the corner. Sonny Dykes hit lightning in a bottle in his first year, getting that team the national championship. Feels like this team and this program can't stay down for long. I feel like this is a good spot for them, even though it's typically a tough opponent on the road in Stanford, but this seems like a good spot for them. And Josh Hoover, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Stanford is probably one of the most improved teams in the country, because last year they were number 131 on my experience chart. I mean, everybody left. And the thing about Stanford transfers, they get their degree, then they leave. Well, right now, he was left with a bunch of freshmen and sophomores last year, brought in a couple of players, but not many. You can't bring in a lot of transfers to Stanford. But now they're number 10 on my experience chart. So I do think Stanford's a vastly improved team over last year. However, I'm going to agree with you 100% in the fact that you like TCU, I like TCU here. The Frogs just 2 years ago were in the national title game. Last year, everything that could go wrong went wrong for them. They were -7 in turnovers, lost a lot of close games, and Sonny Dykes will have them back towards the top. Josh Hoover's back at QB. I like that. They've got plenty of talent here, and probably the key for me is Stanford doesn't draw a lot of fans, so it's not like they're going into an intimidating environment. In fact, Stanford is just 3-15 against the spread at home the last 3 years. So definitely an environment that doesn't fear opponents. Sonny Dykes, they're chomping at the bit. They only have Long Island on deck. I like TCU to roll this one up.
Interesting. So let's jump out to Stillwater Saturday afternoon. You've got a matchup with Oklahoma State hosting South Dakota State. Now, every handful of years, it seems you have this curious early season outing by Mike Gundy's Cowboys. You had the Central Michigan game a number of years ago. Last year, you had this team get boat raced by a G5 team in South Alabama to start last year. And our buddy Pat McAfee said just the other day in the pregame for the Florida State Georgia Tech matchup, if there's a Dakota in the name, don't schedule the school, right? So South Dakota State, yes, one of the better FCS programs. But when you look at what happened in Stillwater in that game against South Alabama last year, they were unsettled at quarterback. They hadn't really discovered their run game with Ollie yet. This is a different team. It's a battle-tested veteran team. It feels that way to me. What's your take on this Oklahoma State hosting South Dakota State matchup, Phil?
Yeah, that's a nice analysis. I like that because I agree with most of it. You take a look at the fact that last year Oklahoma State was number 115 on my experience chart. And as you touched on, they're still learning what their team was. They changed their offensive scheme after that loss to South Alabama, more downhill runs for Ollie Gordon, and all of a sudden the offense changed. This year they're number 1 on my experience chart. 10 starters back on offense, 9 on defense. Alan Bowman's probably the key here. Last year, he only had 15 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. He's got to improve upon that. I think he will. They've got Ollie Gordon. They've got a veteran defense. I love Colin Oliver at linebacker, Nicholas Martin at linebacker. Those two guys are both NFL prospects. And South Dakota State did lose a lot from last year's national championship team. Now, they bring back their quarterback in Gronkowski, but I think Oklahoma State is going to be well prepared for this. I mean, they're taking on defending FCS national champion South Dakota. South Dakota State, I should say, that's won the title 2 straight years. And I actually think a prepared Oklahoma State is the better team. They are the more experienced team. I'm going to take Oklahoma State, and the spread's pretty cheap here.
Bill, we're going to go to the 10:30 kick on FS1 between Wyoming and Arizona State. So West Virginia fans, after they pull off the upset against top 10 Penn State, and after you've had your afternoon and evening beverages, you can settle down right before you go to bed with this one. Couple of inexperienced coaches here. Craig Bowl was at Wyoming for almost a decade. They got a new first-year head coach, Kenny Dillingham, in his second year. I don't know what to really expect out of either of these two teams, especially for Arizona State. Feels like there's a lot of question marks. They're picked toward the bottom of the conference. There's not a whole lot of opportunities for them to get wins on their schedule. Feels like this is kind of like a must-have, and you hate to say that in week 1.
Well, I think it's an important game for Arizona State, no doubt about it. But Wyoming's going to come in pretty confident. Jay Sawvell, their new head coach, it's not like he's having to learn the team here. He's been the defensive coordinator the last 4 years, and he's going to run it a little bit differently. Had an interesting conversation with him. Craig Bowl won his games very conservative, but I tell you what, it worked. He won it with defense, sort of like Iowa. Won it with defense, special teams, strong running game up the middle. Sawvell's going to take a few more chances. He's going to go for it on 4th down a little bit more. They're going to open it up and throw the football a little bit more. Now, that's something coming from a defensive coordinator. Normally, if you're a defense coordinator, you want the offense to be conservative. But he's very high on Evans Svoboda. He thinks Evans Svoboda is an NFL prospect. So keep that in mind as season goes by. If all of a sudden Evans Svoboda starts appearing on your NFL draft list, because he's a big boy with 6'5", 245 with a big arm, got some experience last year. Now, Harrison Whaley, their top running back, is probably out, but when I talked to Sawvell in the spring, he said that the running back unit was one of the deepest and the strength of the team, so I think that depth will pay off here. I like Wyoming as a dog to keep this one close, possibly pull the upset. Arizona State's in year 2. I don't know if they've advanced that much here in year 2. We'll have to see how it goes out. So even out in the desert, I'm going to go with Wyoming plus the points.
Finally, Phil, the biggest reason Mountaineer fans have tuned in. Penn State coming to Morgantown. I'm not going to call it the biggest game in Morgantown since opening the season against Ohio State in 1998 when the Buckeyes were ranked number 1. But I am going to call it maybe the biggest opportunity since then. This is a massive opportunity for Neil Brown and his staff. 2 fundamentally different teams in a lot of ways. Drew Aller's a different player than he was this time last year. Garrett Green is obviously a different player than he was this time last year. The West Virginia offense hadn't discovered Jaheim White at this time last year. Penn State with new coordinators in all 3 phases of the game. So very interesting. But what I want to ask you, we've seen so much movement on this line since it was initially posted earlier in the year, and then it kind of held pat since May. But even recently, in the last week or 2, we've seen more movement on the line. The last I saw was Penn State -8. First of all, why so much movement on that line? Second of all, what are your overall thoughts on this matchup between the Nittany Lions and the Mountaineers, and potentially a game may be impacted by weather as well? Scattered thunderstorms, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's going to, first of all, I think it's going to be a great football game. The environment at West Virginia at home for this against Penn State, oh my Lord. I can't wait to watch that one. Wish I was going to the game. Early lines that they put out in Vegas on opening week games are pretty soft. So it doesn't take a lot to move them. You know, you'll see maybe the mistake by the lines maker, maybe at the beginning, having it maybe underestimating where the action was going to come. And that's why there's been the steady movement. But I don't think it's been like a super heavy movement. But I do think a lot of folks are looking at this as a potential West Virginia upset. And Neil Brown, wow, what a job he did last year. And as you touched on, I mean, they've got the running backs with White and Donaldson. Garrett Green, a quarterback, has been outstanding as a runner and a passer. The offensive line is going to be very good. They do lose, of course, their center or Nestor from last year, and they lose Zach Frazier, which I think is big, but I think they're going to be close to last year in that respect. Defense has a couple of question marks, like in the secondary where they've got a lot of brand new guys coming back. Penn State's defense has no such question marks on defense. It is one of the best defenses in the country. Now, their question marks might be at the wide receiver position, who's going to emerge there, and on the offensive line, which is young. And generally, young offensive lines struggle in an environment like this in their first road start because of the crowd noise. But they've got Singleton and Allen. They've got Drew Alara, veteran quarterback. So I think it's going to be a great game. And, you know, you look at where my computer forecasts it. My computer has Penn State 33-26. That's right around where the line is. So this is a game where, and the yards are actually close, 380 to 370. So I think it's just going to be a great game. I think Penn State wins it, but it wouldn't surprise me if West Virginia wins this game. But I think it's going to be a great football game.
Phil, for West Virginia to do this and pull off the unthinkable, at least nationally, that's that kind of the outlook on this game is that Penn State's going to win this game, but they might get scared. How does West Virginia find a way to get to the finish line and find a way to win this one?
I don't think it'll take too much. I mean, I think they will be able to, even though Penn State's got an elite defense, West Virginia has an elite rush offense. So I think West Virginia will be able to establish the run, especially using Garrett Green running the football. If they can exploit the Penn State weaknesses at the offensive line and wide receiver, force Penn State to protect Alar more in the pass game, I think that would help the secondary, the young secondary for West Virginia. It wouldn't take much. This is going to be a great football game, and either team can win it.
Yeah. So, Jed, do you have anything else for Phil?
I think that's kind of it. You touched on some of the key points. What I keep going back to, Phil, is we all know in critical matchups like this how big turnovers can be. There wasn't a turnover by either team in Happy Valley last year. It was an uncharacteristically clean opener for both sides last year. 6 total penalties, no turnovers. West Virginia, the number I keep going back to, and it's probably not that surprising, under Neil Brown, 9-0 at home when they win the turnover margin. So even if it's just +1, that could be critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Turnovers are important in any game, huh?
Yeah, sure are.
Definitely sways it. And again, having that 60,000 behind your back may not be 100,000, but they're pulling for you. So it's a little bit of a different atmosphere. And I'll also note this. I'm not as deep into the stats as Phil and Jed are, but Penn State under James Franklin, when they open on the road, are 2-2. The 2 games they won were by 4 and by 6. So even if you don't think that West Virginia can win the game, it sounds like there's a good chance they could cover. So anyways, Phil, thank you so much for joining us here for, again, another year this week as well to kick off the 2024 season. We thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Look forward to having you back on next week.
Hey, a lot of fun as always, guys. Appreciate you having me on once again this year, and look forward to a great season of West Virginia football.
We appreciate it, my guy. We'll talk to you next week, and stay seated. We'll get right back here, close out the show here on Phil Steele Friday.
If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buchanan.
Great stuff, as always, from Phil Steele. Such a pleasure to talk to him and kind of pick his brain before the college football weekend, because now, hey, I'm in North Carolina. The sports books are now legal down here now, so I can actually use Phil's knowledge to my advantage. So I will be doing that greatly this upcoming season. But before we get into anything else, just want to send another quick thank you to Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Be sure to visit fortis.us.com. And our newest friends of the show, Johnston's Equipment. Check out their newest location on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Jed, awesome stuff as always from Phil.
It was, it sounds like his computers, which we always have so much fun listening to talk about his computers. His computers had this pegged as a pretty tight matchup, which no surprise there. But I also think, Skyler, it's a good time to remind people as we draw now within hours of kickoff against Penn State. Great chance to go back and visit the breakdown we did this summer on Garrett Green, both as a passer and a runner, full fleshed out episodes on that. We previewed West Virginia's offense, West Virginia's defense, and then just this week in previewing this matchup against Penn State, you're going to want to check that out. Great stuff by Cody Alexander. Cody did a good job of forecasting what you might expect. Tom Allen, the new defensive coordinator at Penn State, inheriting that personnel that Manny Diaz had as the old defensive coordinator a year ago. Andy Kotelnicki, we talk a lot about that. We're familiar with him from his days at Kansas. What might the Penn State offense look like with him directing traffic? And this is something that I would tell West Virginia fans. I've been saying it all week. The staff's been saying it all week. You can impact this football game. You absolutely can. We're going to have 60,000 strong, make a difference in this game. And it's going to take all hands on deck for the balance of 60 minutes. If we can drag them into a similar rock fight to what last year's game was in Happy Valley, it was 14-7. It was a one-score game at halftime. But the problem was when they came out in the second half, they had 110,000 in their corner, and we blinked first. If we can drag them into a similar game, all of a sudden, all those things favor us in the second half because we will force them to potentially blink first with the crowd on our side. It's going to take a full 60 minutes, Scholar. Last year, here's one final stat for you. Last year, Penn State led the nation in fourth quarter scoring. They averaged almost 12 points a game, and they also led the nation in fourth quarter scoring on the road. So even if we're fortunate enough to build a lead, it's going to take a full 60 minutes to pull this off. It's absolutely attainable. It's absolutely doable. And the crowd can play a huge role in the outcome of this football game. Let's show them what it's like. Penn State's played in some tough venues. They've been under the lights in the Big House. They've been under the lights in the Horseshoe. I just can't imagine they're taking it that seriously, thinking a lazy noon kickoff in a 60,000 seat stadium. James Franklin's saying all the right things when you listen to him in the media. But I just can't imagine those kids who have played in these Big Ten venues and these massive crowds that play in front of 100,000 every week at home. I don't know. I think that West Virginia's crowd, I've said this on Twitter this week, the biggest underdog in this matchup, the biggest underdog on Saturday might be the West Virginia fan base. Let's truly show them what you are capable of and have an impact in the outcome of this football game.
I've heard it so many times. West Virginia fans say our 60,000 could be better than some people's 80 or 90,000, and I've experienced that. It is something to witness for sure. And my goodness, Jed, like, could you just imagine what Saturday evening is going to be like if they're able to find a way to win this game? I mean, you're talking about just the whole conversation all Saturday long, all weekend long for the first weekend of college football. It's going to be about the West Virginia Mountaineers. And that would be a really cool thing for Neil Brown and this program as they really get started. You would obviously win next week against Albany, go into the backyard brawl 2-0. You'd have a number next year, name some real momentum heading your way. So this could be the start of something special. We've talked about it umpteen times about how last year was kind of the turning point for the program. This feels like the ultimate launching pad if they can win this game. So we'll find out come Saturday afternoon. West Virginia, Penn State kicking off on Fox at noon. Big noon kickoff will be there. Pat McAfee will be there today, and Machine Gun Kelly. They're bringing out all the stops for this one. They've even canceled school to get ready for all the traffic that's coming into Morgantown. So it's about to be a massive party. Hopefully the Mountaineers deliver and then the partying can continue throughout the weekend. So that's going to do it for us here today on our show. Be sure to follow and subscribe here on the YouTube channel and on our Twitter account as well at In the Gun Podcast. That's Jed Drenning, the signal caller. I'm Scala Callahan. Also for Wesley Euler and Owen Schmidt, the runaway beer truck. And as always, tell an ear and be an ear. And we will be back here next week to recap West Virginia and Penn State.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
I love the state. I got a chance to play here. And this is awesome. This is the way I pictured it.
This mission is over. It's over.